Hi, I'm Father Bob Ayres, Chair of the Ordination Preparation Team, OPT, and very excited to welcome you as part of the team. And I thought that one of the things that could be very helpful is to have some of our legacy leaders, folks who have been involved in the discernment process over decades, to share some of their insights about what it means to be on the team and some important tips and important values that we have as part of the team. When you're helping someone discern what God is doing in their life, it is like doing spiritual surgery, and one of the most important things that we do, and the importance of being gentle and intentional and caring as part of a team. It's such an important time in a person's life that we are able to speak into them God's grace and His truth, and to help them move through the process. And for some folks, to help them determine that they really aren't being called to ordained ministry, or at least not yet. And it may be something that's coming, but that we feel like they're not quite ready for it at this point. There's almost always a little advice and certain elements of recommendations that we will give to the Archdeacon Jessica Jones for the person. So that's not any kind of an indication of a weakness or a doubt or a suspicion about the person's character or their knowledge or their training. But there's a sense that we want to create a culture that has a very high standard, and that we all trust each other to help us continue to improve, continue to learn more, continue to be more equipped to serve the Lord. Now, one of the other things that you'll hear, and I think is very important, is that we're going to have some differences on the team from our theological backgrounds and our theological influences, and just where we land in the scriptures on a lot of these things that I like to call secondary issues. They're important, but they're not the primary non-negotiables. And so what we have to do in the interviews is that's not a time for us to try to get our point across or to make sure that somebody sees our point of view or something, but to trust each other and to ask good questions, and maybe make a suggestion of some other authors that the person might want to read, to just understand perspectives that are different than their own. Discernment is really that sacred space where we bring grace and truth together in the lives of other people and gently guide them and shape them in ways that set them on the right trajectory. And I find that is exhibited in how well we ask questions, and how well we listen, and how well we ask for deeper clarification on certain points, and let people express things and communicate things that maybe they didn't even realize that they knew themselves. That's all part of that discernment process. It's such a wonderful experience, and I love being a part of the Ordination Preparation Team. And my responsibility is simply for the chaplains and the scheduling and making sure that people are prepared and have the right culture that we have among the ordinance and among the chaplains as well. All the other things working with the people in the pipeline is really the responsibility of Archdeacon Jessica Jones. And so that's what she has asked me to do, is to help you be your best self and to be bonded with the other folks in the Ordination Preparation Team. And I'm so glad that you're part of this mission at the Gulf Atlantic Diocese.
My name's Travis Boline. I'm the rector at All Saints Anglican Church in Tallahassee, Florida. And I've been in ordained ministry for 23 years now, and for at least 20 of those, I've been a part of discernment ministry, helping people discern a call to holy orders. I was originally drawn to this ministry because I had had such a positive experience in my own discernment. I was very unclear as to what the Lord was calling me to, and needed lots of prayerful help along the way, and received it from some very generous and wonderful godly people. And so I very much wanted to be able to provide that for others. In seminary, I discovered quite a few of my colleagues had very bad experiences. And I just wanted to be a part of the solution and not the problem. So I love helping people of all ages who are feeling a call by the Lord to serve Him in His church, explore that and wrestle with it, kind of pick it apart, and see what the Lord is truly leading them towards. When I'm going to be meeting with an aspirant for the first time, I always ask that the Lord would help us see not only who the person is, but who the Lord is calling that person to be. Not only what they've experienced or are experiencing, but where they're headed. And the Lord takes a lot of David's shepherd boys and turns them into King Davids, and you don't want to miss that. I also want to be very clear, ask the Lord to help us be very clear that the call is to ordained ministry and not to lay ministry, because a majority of the work that happens in the parish is through the laity. And it's a vital and valuable calling in itself. So that's an important thing that we're trying to tease out. Is this a lay call or an ordained call? And of course you look for openness in the person. The last thing you want to see is someone who's just looking for us to amen what they've already decided. Someone who's truly open and humble and submitting to the process to say, I believe this was the Lord's calling me to. Can you help me confirm that? I don't know about my colleagues in this, but whenever I'm reading the canonical exams of someone else, I immediately think I could have never passed this. And may or may not be true, but that's not exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for a grasp of understanding of the main areas that we're being examined for. We're looking for whether they've truly wrestled with it, whether they've tried to make it their own understanding and not just regurgitating for the sake of a test. How they communicate it. Are they able to express it in a way that's going to be useful to the people they'll be preaching to and teaching? And I always think it's important, even though I'm not really equipped to examine all parts of the test, all 9 areas. I tend to focus more on the practical areas for my own experience and strengths. But I think it's important to go ahead and read all of them, all of the answers, to get a kind of overall picture of the person and their understanding and their approach and their ability to communicate. I've been blessed to serve with a handful of people pretty much all along. We've grown very close over the years by doing this work together, and it's been such a blessing and a joy. And it's very helpful in the interviews and in the examinations to know each other's strengths, so that you don't, if something comes up, you know that so-and-so will address it because that's where their strength is, and you don't have to feel like you're the only one who can speak to it. And there's a trust and a confidence in working together. And now that the team has gotten bigger, which is wonderful, we've brought some wonderful new people to serve. The challenge is going to be to develop that relationship between us so that we can have that level of trust and confidence and ease with one another as we minister together in this area. It's been a real privilege to serve. When I see these young men and women being ordained and see them preaching and celebrating and taking calls at various churches, it's just a real joy and a privilege to know that I was able to be a very small part of that in helping them discern the Lord's call. It's challenging at times. Again, the call is not always to ordained ministry. Sometimes it is to lay ministry, and that's not something people always want to hear. But knowing that being where God has called you is the most important thing, not necessarily what you want personally, helps you in those particular times. Fortunately, those times are few and far between. the church does a very good job of discerning on its own before bringing people to the diocesan level. And so the majority of the outcome is always that joyful affirmation of, yes, this is the Lord's call, and yes, how can we help equip you and prepare you to live it out?
I'm Michael Petty. I'm the Canon for Discipleship at St. Peter's Cathedral. I've served here since the church was founded in 2005, and I think I've been on the Ordination Preparation Team for 8 or 9 years or thereabouts. Serving as a chaplain on the Ordination Preparation Team has been a very rewarding experience in a number of ways. One of the ways that I think it's been really rewarding is to watch as folks start out as postulants, and then after a while they become your colleagues. And I think that's really the ideal in the church, because in Anglicanism, right, we understand that we're not just simply individuals, but if you're a deacon or you're a priest, you're a member of an order. And part of your mission is to support those who are part of that order. Another really rewarding experience, I think, about serving as a chaplain on the OPT has also been just to see the number of gifted people that God's calling into ministry. It really is a way of really getting a sense of hope about the future of the church, kind of looking at how God is moving in the lives of just very different people of very different ages, very different backgrounds, working in their lives to call them into the ordained ministry of the church. And watching all that happen has been just absolutely wonderful. The postulancy interviews are, I think, difficult from the standpoint of the fact that, as far as I know, we don't really have like an algorithm to determine whether someone's called or not. It really is a matter of discernment. And to my mind, this is one of the greatest responsibilities that the OPT has, is helping the bishop make decisions about folks who are called to holy orders. The first thing I think I would say is that you always have to be on your guard against looking for people that you like. You have to put those thoughts aside. The question is not whether I like this person, whether I can relate to this person, but your primary responsibility in this context is to try and help discern whether they're called or not. And I think you can look at a number of things. I think that one thing that's really important is getting a sense of that person's sense of their own self. Calling is something which affects the whole of a person, and so I think you'll want to look at that. I think you'll also want to look at how they talk about their own relationship with God and their own role in the church. Is that something which energizes them? Is that something about which they show a great deal of excitement? Is that something which they find absolutely compelling? I think those are important things to look at. I think another thing that's really important to sort of take into consideration is, does this person seem to be the kind of person who is open to learning, open to criticism, open to evaluation? Are they open to the voice of the church speaking into their lives? Are they open to the voice of God speaking into their lives? I think those are really fundamental things to be on the lookout for. And it's really important also, I think, that you also be open to the insights of the folks who, from the OPT, who have participated with you in that interview. Try not to develop preconceptions. Try not to think that you have this person all figured out. Do form impressions, but also be very, very open to listening to the impressions and suggestions of those who've participated with you in that interview. The canonical examination, the oral part, can be really anxiety producing. And so I think one of the really most important things that you'll want to do there, especially if you're the facilitator, is you'll want to try to do everything you can to put that person at their ease. Reminding them of the purpose of the exam, that it's not they're not taking the GRE or they're not taking the LSAT or something like that, but rather the purpose of this exam is diagnostic. It's to help the OPT be aware of both strengths and weaknesses that can be remediated later on. I think it's also really important to let the person that you're examining know that this is a group of brothers and sisters who are working with you to help you fulfill God's call on their life. So I think that's a really important de-stressor. Also, interjecting humor wherever possible is always welcome, so that can be a great thing too. To my mind, a really important thing in doing the canonical examinations, and this may be self-evident, but I want to emphasize it, is reading every word this person has written, making sure that you're familiar with the way they've responded to the questions, that as you've read their responses, you've made notes. I think it's really important to, if you have a question about something, making a note of that, and then following up with them in the oral interview. If you're totally satisfied with all their written answers, and that's going to be really unusual, then I think another really important thing to do is to take a couple steps beyond their written answers so the person's kind of getting a little stretched a bit. This isn't obviously an inquisition, but it is an attempt to see how this person kind of thinks on their feet. Are they able to deal with spontaneous questions? How do they handle things that might be difficult? And of course also, do they feel comfortable reaching that point where they have to say, you know, I don't know the answer to that question. And that's fine. That's a perfectly fine answer to give. It shows some honesty. I think all those things are really important to keep into consideration as you're examining folks. I think the other thing that you'll want to do is you'll want to remember that you were in their shoes at one time too, and just kind of be mindful of how you felt when you were on the other end of the examination. I think that's a really important thing to do as well. Relationships within the OPT among the chaplains is really important. I would actually say it's essential to the proper functioning of the group at a number of ways, right? We're going to be making really important decisions about the lives of people. None of us can do that alone. We're going to be reliant on the judgments and insights of other people on the team, and that means we're going to have a certain level of respect for them. And so one of the things that I know I've seen is there are going to be times and situations where you might disagree with other people on the team. It's really essential to handle that disagreement in the appropriate way. And I think the two important considerations there are going to be, one, we always are going to attempt to handle disagreements with charity. We're going to operate on the charitable assumption. And two, we're going to try and handle those disagreements in the most constructive way possible so that it doesn't become a sort of like interpersonal argument, right? So I'm going to articulate my principles, the other person is going to articulate theirs. We may disagree, but we're going to have to come to at least a sense, right, that here we have some principles, I disagree with those principles, and we'll leave it as a principled disagreement. But I think it's really important that as we go about the process of doing postulancy interviews and doing canonical examinations, that we have the kind of relationship amongst ourselves where there's a fundamental level of trust. Because if that trust isn't there, then we're not going to be able to do our work properly. I also think that it's really important that if someone's coming in for a postulancy interview or someone's coming in for a canonical examination, they're going to come in with the sense that there's a fundamental level of agreement and respect amongst us, so that that's an environment in which they feel comfortable. So I think it's really important, both in the context of meetings and also out of the context of meetings, that we really work at developing strong interpersonal relationships with one another. We understand where everybody on the team is coming from, and we arrive at least a respect and honoring of judgments that we may even disagree with. I think, one of the really important things that we all need to remind ourselves, regardless of how long we've served on the OPT, is this is a fundamentally important service to the diocese and also to the church. I think it's really important that we remind ourselves over and over again that we're not simply individuals who are here kind of making decisions about things that the kind of people we might like to see in ministry or anything like that. As members of the OPT, we're fundamentally servants of the bishop and therefore servants of the diocese. And I think that part of what that means is it means that we're in constant prayer that the Holy Spirit is going to guide us and prompt us in that service. And therefore, right, our work needs to be characterized by a profound mark and measure of humility. Humility in the face of God, humility in the face of the bishop, and also humility in the face of one another as we seek to fulfill God's will for the Gulf Atlantic Diocese and as we seek to serve our bishop in that capacity.
I'm Sudduth Cummings. I was an Episcopal priest, received a call when I was 14 years old, and so I've been a priest for some time, now retired. But I'm always been interested in the recruitment and examination and training of potential clergy, and I taught at Trinity Seminary for a while, and that was a happy experience. Well, I've always thought that the recruitment, training, and examination of potential clergy is one of the most important things in the life of the church, in addition, of course, to preaching the word and celebrating the sacraments, because we need to have well-trained and properly vetted clergy to enter the ministry. And so it's been a high priority for me, really throughout my ministry. And I just think it's very important. Also, it's just kind of fun to get to know the various applicants, or as we said in one diocese, instead of aspirant, we called them perspirants. So, but it's just interesting to meet these young people, sometimes older people, and and to figure out where they are theologically, what they might know, and so figure out what they don't know, and to really ask the Lord, what is their calling? And it's just one of the most important things I think we can do. Obviously, I think that it's top priority that they have a heart that is seeking God. That there is a relationship with our Lord Jesus Christ, that they have a hunger for theological knowledge, and that they love the church, and they care not only for God's people but for the whole life of the church at all levels, because a priest is not just at a local level. A priest always has responsibilities beyond the local church. And so I think that a sense of being called by God to be not just a leader in the church, but also someone who cares for the maintenance of the life of the church. And you get to know the various applicants through the written exams first, and kind of get an impression of who they are and where they're coming from and what they know. And then you meet them in person and interact with them. And they come in all ages and all levels of knowledge and preparation. And so I think, the most important thing is what's their relationship to God. That's absolutely critical. And then do they have this hunger, this thirst for knowing more about God and His church, so that, they can not only continue to grow themselves through seminary and through ordained ministry, but also that they have a sense of, in their calling, of that God is the goal and the life of the church and the ministry. Relationships within the team is a bit challenging because of the size of the diocese. Geographically, it is huge. It helps when people know each other ahead of time. Like with Travis Boline, I actually taught her when I was on the faculty of Trinity Theological Seminary. And so I've known her for a long time. I think getting together, every time we're together, we need time together. And I've always been in favor of a time for retreats together or something like that, so that we can interact and just simply have the time. Because again, in this size diocese, that is a challenge. Being a member of the OPT team is, I think, a great privilege and a tremendous responsibility, and should be approached prayerfully, carefully, and there should be a sense of the seriousness of it. That doesn't mean you can't have fun. And in all our meetings and interviews, there's plenty of laughter and happy interaction. And of course, sometimes, obviously, disagreement where people are coming from and their various theological positions. But I do think there needs to be built up a sense of unity, of purpose, and of fellowship within the team itself, so that it can act as one, just simply, instead of this person and this person having their own opinions, but there needs to be a shared common purpose and sense of responsibility.